The title, as was advertised, was the forgotten heritage or legacy of Nahjul Balagha, the Imam Ali's understanding of the Qur'an, the Prophet, and ultimately Islam. Why have I chosen this topic? Maybe you know something about it or don't know something about it. Every Ramadan that comes, my heart always goes to two things, which is the Qur'an and Ali ibn Talib alayhi salam. Both were intimately connected. You always see this kind of hadith that the Qur'an is with Ali or Ali is with the Qur'an. These are a hadith you have heard perhaps many times in your life. My humble task, which comes from my heart, is exactly what do we mean by the purpose of the Qur'an as it was revealed. What is the point of opening this book? Why not open any other book, any other scripture? And why should we look to Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam as opposed to someone else? I mean, there are many saintly figures in history. There are many revolutionaries. So why Imam Ali alayhi salam? And specific, if we are moving more towards Islam, and specifically Shi'i Islam, then what exactly do we know about Ali ibn Talib alayhi salam? Now, these questions were the same questions I asked when I was 15 years old, and my dear father and mother used to take me to the masjid, and lecture was being given. And I used to ask, why are people reciting salawat? That's the first question I asked. Then to, why are they praising these traits of Ali ibn Talib alayhi salam? What's the difference between Imam Ali and the other Imams? What's the difference between Imam Ali and Gandhi or Malcolm X? These are the questions that were always, plaguing me. And I remember a book I picked up from the bookshelf, which was called Imam Ali the Magnificent. This was 15 years old, okay? You can still find it. I think it's al-islam.org. And I picked that book up. This was during the lecture, actually, because sometimes I couldn't understand or I was trying to find out the answers. That book was the first book that gave me an insight into the personality of Ali ibn Abi Talib. The personality. I don't mean the Imam. I mean the character, the traits, the personality. So let me ask you some questions and I can see how to move the lecture. Now, you don't have to answer. These are rhetorical questions, but maybe I'll get from your nodding whether you know the question or not, or whether the answer or not. Was Imam Ali alayhi salam a very witty person or a serious person? Okay, saying witty, or some saying serious. Okay. How did he raise his children? Specifically, I'm not saying that they were imams and he's a pious household. What lessons did he teach them, or what happened in daily life? What words did he give them that they grew up to be these very saintly figures? I mean, what did he tell them every day? Was it just like, these are my sons, I am pious, they're going to be pious? There's no answer there, see? So I got you out there, maybe. Okay? Number three. When he taught the Quran, how did he teach it? Did he teach it the way we are teaching today? So did he teach, for example, tajweed and tilawa? And then, for example, he told them to memorize some surahs, as what is happening now. Was there Quran competitions? How did he actually teach the society Quran? Was the Quran reserved only for people who were interested in it? Or was it sort of, he tried to make it open for people? What messages did he give? No answer there. It's 2 points to me. Oh, some of you have an answer. Okay, mashallah. Rhetorical questions, but I'm making you think, okay? 3, how did he use the Quran in wider society? So that means, was the Quran only for Muslims? Or, for example, did he have a vision of the Quran and he built frameworks from it and he tried to reform society? And even if you think, okay, all the answers are yes, okay, the next question is, well, give me proof. How did he do this? What did he do exactly? My questions at age of 15 have not changed, which is, I want to delve into exactly what was Imam Ali's approach to teaching and understanding Quran, to understanding what we mean by ta'aleem, instruction, or tarbiyah, nurturing or education. And the last question for you, which is we are doing, inshallah, we will do A'mal today, yes? And over the next few nights. So, how did he conduct A'mal? Do we know that? Do we know how what kind of A'mal was there really? Was there A'mal? I don't know. So, those who are not interested, no, we will do A'mal. I'm just making a joke, but what was his approach to spirituality? How did he train people? So my question now is, do you agree these are important questions, yes or no? Yes, are you all saying yes? Okay, that's good. Then I don't have to change my material, okay? But I'm happy to change too, because I want you to be satisfied with what I'm giving. Look, already we're getting two implications. If you said that these questions are important, right? Then that means we don't know the answer to them after 14 centuries, is that correct? After 14 centuries, we do not know the answers to these questions. That's a kind of sad feeling, yes? A very sad feeling that we don't actually know how Imam Ali lived his life and what his actual personality was. If you ask the personality of celebrities or contemporary people, I think our youngsters and ourselves, we would be able to answer. Personality of Joe Biden, personality of Rishi Sunak. I mean, you see them on television, you see their kind of traits, you can connect with them. Whether you like or dislike them is another question, but you understand them. I'm asking the same question, a simple question. How do we connect with Ali bin Talib alayhi salam? Because in my small view, he is the gateway to understand the Qur'an and the Prophet sallallahu. Let me start with the Qur'an itself. I pose the question, what is the purpose of revelation? What is it? I mean, is the Qur'an there to convert people to Islam? Is the Qur'an there to increase our ethics? Is the Qur'an there simply as an academic study and for tafsir? What is the purpose? The early revelations of the Qur'an, according to majority of Shi'i and Sunni scholars, were the first 5 verses of Suratul Alaq. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم الذي علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم. First 5 verses. Recite in the name of your Lord who created human beings from a blood clot or leech. Recite, your Lord is most honorable. He who taught by the pen, he who taught human beings what they did not know. Okay? So, why these verses and why not something else? Allah could have revealed Salah. He could have revealed Siyam, fasting, Zakat. Whenever you think of a Muslim, that's the first thing you think of. They're praying and inshallah they're giving sadaqah or they're fasting as we're doing today. Actually, Allah was very purposeful with the revelation. You notice in the first 5 verses, it is all about ilm, knowledge. Ikra, meaning to recite or read. Okay? And reciting and reading in what manner? In the manner that we reflect upon Allah who created us, our relationship with Allah. And He is teaching human beings by the pen. Allah is the first teacher of human beings and the only teacher of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I do notice the decibel level of the salawat from the Muharram, but I'm not blaming you. I'm not blaming you at all. I'm just telling you that I do notice, okay? But I'm trying my best. I know it is difficult, okay? Number three, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He's teaching us about something that we are ignorant of. So, the Qur'an itself, the purpose of revelation is to move human beings without distinction You notice insan, not Muslimun or Muslimin. Insan, human beings. Quran for human beings, not for Muslims. Quran is to elevate human society from a level of ignorance to a level of knowledge, where there is an enduring relationship between human beings and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How beautiful is that? That Allah is concerned with our ignorance and concerned with our relationship with Him. And not only that, He wants to give us the tools to gain knowledge ourselves. Remember those adverts, that you teach somebody to fish and they will fish for the rest of their life? This is the same thing with us. You teach somebody how to gain knowledge, they will gain knowledge for the rest of their lives, inshallah. Yes? So that means He wants us to be independent, He wants us to think about our existence, and He wants us to be confident in that thinking. Why qalam? In the tafsir, you read most of the tafsir, Majmul Bayan, Tafsir al-Safi, you read many of the tafsir, they always say that whatever we have in this life, like qalam, pen, or aqal, intellect, it is a reflection of the tools which exist before creation. That means there is a divine pen, and the reflection of the divine pen is the pen that we have now. Okay? Or the intellect of Allah, or the intellect of the angels, the heavenly intellect, that now has come down to us in the sense of our minds and our souls. I begin with these verses, because Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam has been described as the following. Now, these ahadith that I am giving you are ahadith from our fellow Sunni scholars, and then I will give you descriptions from non-Muslims. Why am I starting like that? If you want to get to know someone, you can get to know them from what their own people say. But then you can say, well, that's bias. Okay, if you want to say something about me, you know me. Okay, you can say something about me. Inshallah, it is positive, no problem. But better if somebody else from outside of oil is saying something about me, and that is reverberated throughout society, you can already see, well, okay, if other people are talking like that about, there may be a speaker and there's something positive, then you can put more weight to it, because you can be accused of bias. That's why I'm starting from beyond the Shi'i sect. Here are a couple of ahadith which you may find interesting, okay? The first one is from Al-Askani, Neshapuri, from Shawahid al-Tanzil, Volume 1, page 34. Umar ibn Khattab, the second Khalif has said this: the most learned and knowledgeable amongst us in judgment, qada, and recitation, tilawa of the Qur'an is Ali ibn Talib alayhi salam. Now I chose that very carefully. We have in fiqh, when you study fiqh in the Hawza, you study what is known as Kitabul Qada, the chapter of judgment. Judgment is legal judgment. So when you go to the court and you want a judgment, for example, against the defendant, then you are obtaining the judgment from the qadi, from the judge. Yes? And if any of you have studied law, you know anything about law, you will know that there is such a thing as case law. In case law, you would have different levels of court. Is the highest court here Supreme Court? Okay, same thing in the UK. If the Supreme Court makes a judgment, it is binding on the lower courts. Yes? Binding on the lower courts. Unless the Supreme Court changes its mind. And then you have the law which changes, or the interpretation of the law. When Ali alayhi salam is giving a judgment, that judgment is not only decisive, but binding on the plaintiff and the defendant, or claimant and defendant, and also binding on the rest of society, and is making a judgment on the matters that are coming to him. That's one aspect of Ali's knowledge. Then you have tilawa, which is recitation. Now, as some of you may be aware, during the time of Umar and Uthman, there were different recitations, 7 recitations and more than that. people had an issue with what type of recitation was correct and valid. Today, there are still those 7 and I think a bit more recitations which are valid. So you can recite the Quran in different ways. You can say Maliki Yawmiddin, or you can say Maliki Yawmiddin. If you say Sirat with a Sad, that is correct, but originally it comes from Sin Sirat. Okay? If you read the Quran, for example, in Surah Al-Takwir, if you say Washamsu Kuwirat, Kuwirat with the Shadda, you can say Kuwirat or you can say Kuwirat. You can say Sujjirat or Sujirat. They are both perfectly valid because there are acceptable ways to recite the Quran. But in that time, one of the issues was, and it is still a big issue today, which is if you recite the Quran differently, does it change the meaning? Well, yes, it can change the meaning. It can. Okay? But the beauty of the Quran is even if there are slight variations in the meaning, the essential meaning doesn't change. Okay, so I'm giving you a piece of history. Alright? So when Imam Ali was the most knowledgeable in tilawa, it means the tilawa of Rasulullah as it was revealed. This is very significant. Okay? So if any of your children, for example, want to become a qari, you may choose different styles of recitation and all would be valid. So Imam Ali had knowledge in these areas. Salawat, please. And this is Umar ibn Khattab saying this, okay, as a second Caliph. This is not to create Shia-Sunni discord. It's to show that there was respect of Umar ibn Khattab to Imam Ali's knowledge. Another one, Umar himself says, and this is from Ibn Qutaybah. Ibn Qutaybah was a 9th century Sunni scholar, polymath, born in Kufa. In his Ta'awil Mukhtalif al-Hadith, he says, I seek refuge in God from all problems in which Abul Hasan, that is Imam Ali, is not present. Is not present. Which means Umar ibn Khattab actually took advice and consulted Ali ibn Talib alayhi salam for numerous problems that came in front of him. Again, we should think about Shia-Sunni dialogue in a very different way. It doesn't always have to be about wilaya. It can be about ilm and knowledge and how Imam Ali still gave advice to those perhaps that may not have supported him. And a third one, which is one of my favorites. This is from Jalaluddin Suyuti. Jalaluddin Suyuti, one of the greatest Sunni scholars, and in his famous book, Al-Itqan fi Ulum al-Qur'an, volume 2, page 493, as reported from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, said the noble Qur'an was revealed in 7 modes, ahraf, 7 modes. Each mode has an inner and outer aspect. And the inner and outer aspect of each mode is with Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. Okay? So when we open the Quran, there are 7 layers. And even in those 7 layers of inner and outer, there are further layers, and Ali has knowledge of these. Right. Before I go into the quote, when I was younger, I sometimes heard these narrations. I still struggle to understand why people were praising Ali alayhi salam if they didn't actually know what knowledge of the Quran Ali had. I found it very paradoxical. People were giving salawat, but in the lecture, and still today, please correct me if inshallah certain things have changed. But for many years, I'm talking about well into my 20s and 30s, I heard very few lectures about Nahjul Balagha in the mosque. Do you feel that's true today? Yes? Yes. Yes. Okay, people on YouTube, if you're listening, people are saying yes today. Okay? I shouldn't tell you my age, but I think men, it's not a big issue for men, right? I don't think so. I'm 40. I don't know if I look 40 or not, I don't know. I'm 40. I'm talking about 15 years. 25 years later, you're still giving me the same response. And at 15 years age, as a teenager, I had the same question. Why aren't there questions about Nahjul Balagha? Why are people giving salawat? I don't understand. If you don't know why somebody is praised, why are you praising him? Okay, I understand we love Ali, no problem. There's no qualms there. But why? I want to answer this in these lectures. Now, this lecture is more of an introductory. I'm giving us the tools. From tomorrow, I'm going to humbly tackle these questions head on. I want to give substantial answers to you. So we go away understanding why Ali is praised, but we can implement it in our life. The more important question is how we raise our children and how we lead our life. Okay? So these are 3 hadith. Now let me give you the second hadith. It's not a hadith. This is a statement from an extremely well-known English philosopher and literary giant. His name is Dr. Henry Stubb. Dr. Henry Stubb lived during 1632 to 1676. Okay, that's how boring I am reading these things. Okay, 17th century. All right. He has a book called An Account of the Rise and Progress of Mahometism. Mahometism was the term used in 16th and 7th century Britain when they wanted to understand Islam. They referred to our beloved Prophet Muhammad as Mahomet, and they didn't refer to Islam, they said Mahometism, because there was a kind of lack of respect there, but sometimes not lack of respect also. People were simply trying to understand, who is this Moor? Have you heard the term Moor? Yeah, Moor as somebody that is of African descent or colored descent, and they described him as Moor. Today it's a very degrading term, but at that time it was very common. So they said this Moor, Mahomet, okay, who was he, right? In this book, which people criticized during its time, because it actually praised the Prophet and praised Islam. Just look at this quote. This quote is from Dr. Henry Stubb about Imam Ali. See how it differs from our ahadith and the way we look at Imam Ali. Dr. Henry Stubb said, Imam Ali had a contempt or a hate of the world, its glory and pomp. He feared God much, he feared God a lot. He gave a great deal in charity, alms, was just in all his actions. He was humble and he was affable. Affable means likable. He was a likable guy, Imam Ali. You don't really hear that. It means if you sat with Imam Ali, he wasn't like boring speaker sitting in the corner. He was a likable guy. You could chat to him. And Imam Ali had an exceedingly quick wit. You notice when you spoke to him, he was witty, kind of jokey or intelligent responses, and an ingenuity. He had a uniqueness that was not common. He was exceedingly learned, not in those sciences that terminate in speculations, in theory, but in those which extend to practice. This was Ali bin Talib. I have not found a better quote within history than this one, that actually summarized who Ali was. Because when I read Nahjul Balagha, it is this quote which comes to my mind. If you read sermons of Nahjul Balagha, and these are the next 4 lectures, but I'll give you an insight. How long are his sermons, Imam Ali's sermons? Do you know how many minutes he took to speak? If you open Nahjul Balagha, you will find 5-line sermons, 10 lines, 20 lines, maybe 2 pages. How long did he speak for? Couple of minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes at the most? And we have a tradition of 40 minutes or 1-hour lectures. Why? Do you think people are going to register everything? Now fine, okay, intellect has moved on, people want to learn, no problem there. But if people are getting tired, and that's why I was very honest, if you're getting tired, I will stop. Because there is no point. There is no point if people are not imbibing the information. Number 2, if you look at his sermons, do you know what themes he covers? He covers politics, ilm siyasi, okay? The politics of the day. He covers history, he covers the Qur'an, he covers spirituality, and this is all in the open. He covers education, he covers, even if you read his sayings, I think today these sayings will be about psychology. He covers psychological issues, about love, about depression. So Imam Ali was truly a practical man. When he was giving the sermon, he was already aware of the problems in society. He addressed them and addressed them according to the knowledge and attention span of his audience. There was no such thing with Ali ibn Talib that, okay, I've got to keep my sermon the same content or the same length as yesterday. No. You open Nahjul Balagha, go on your phones, you will see everything differently. Okay? So, the second point I want to make to you is, hopefully I've answered it, Imam Ali was fundamentally a likable man, he was a practical man, and he was aware of the issues of today. When today we are speaking or looking at Gaza and Israel, okay, if you look at what's happening, the actions of Israel are no different to the actions of genocide that happened in history, as was said by our dear sister Maryam, okay, in acknowledging the rightful owners or heirs of this land, right? The only difference is what happened to Native Americans, what happened to Aborigines. The only difference is today we're seeing it on social media. That's the only difference. That's number one. This is very important. What Israel is doing is a product of not only colonialism, but it is a way of looking at the human race. If you were to pick up books in the library, maybe 2 centuries ago, you would find writings that depict that a black or African race or a race of color is inferior because of genetics. Because of their DNA, their mind is smaller and inferior. Isn't that the way Palestinians are looked at? So today's actions are not as if, oh, we have human rights and we have United Nations conventions. Forget all that. Nobody's listening to that. What is happening is that inside people's minds, people are thinking that human beings are on certain levels. Okay? Right. Keep that in your mind. That's why in the title I said, what was Imam Ali's understanding of Islam? Look at the Prophet. When Prophet was in his society, what was type of thinking? That there was a level of superiority amongst Arabs, amongst the Quraysh. That there should be slaves, that women were inferior and orphans could be ignored. That is how society was. Bilal, who then eventually was freed, Bilal could be whipped, no problem. Bilal could be commanded to kill because he was an animal. How did our beloved Prophet and Imam Ali transform society that poison in the mind that you think somebody else is inferior can actually be rectified? That I will answer in my 4th and 5th lecture. That's a very difficult question to answer, by the way. Because when Ali ibn Talib became Khalif, the 4th Khalif, he actually used the Qur'an in a practical manner and instituted policies about charitable distribution and about racism. He used the Qur'an to tackle racism in his society. Whenever you heard literature and speeches on Qur'an and racism, and that the Qur'an and racism can tackle the contemporary problems today, the first issue that we have to tackle, which is why I'm spending time, is we have to reframe the question totally. We have to reframe how we have looked at Ali and the Qur'an. Salawat. We now come on to Nahjul Balagha, right? Because that is the topic I have to deal with as well. Nahjul Balagha, the manner or way of eloquence, okay? It has been translated into English, no problem. Alhamdulillah. May Allah bless the scholar that has translated English. If you look on Amazon today, there is a recent translation coming out. I don't know if it is already out, by Sister Tahira Qutubuddin. Yes, I want to order it. I don't know if you have ordered it. Now, I've looked at the translation, but she is a specialist in Arabic grammar, and I would love to see how she's translated the Quran. May Allah bless her for undertaking this work. Okay? I'm saying this to you because, yes, Nahjul Balagha is in Arabic. Whatever translation we can find, my question to you is a very simple one. Have we respected the book and contribution of Nahjul Balagha, that today ourselves and our children can pick it up and say, today I am going to read Nahjul Balagha? Is that something that is there in our community? My humble research says no. I have been teaching in madrasa for many years. No madrasa syllabus teaches Nahjul Balagha, with maybe a few exceptions. There is no real teaching of Nahjul Balagha. It is not taught like Shakespeare. If you ask me about plays of Shakespeare, I can tell you. I can give you a boring lecture on Othello if you want, no problem. I can tell you about Iago and Othello and Desdemona and all these people. Because all of these characters have been stuck in my mind. That I look, at the world through the eyes of Shakespeare. I look at evil, I look at good. So why have we not done this with Nahjul Balagha? See how ignored it is. Let me give you a few quotes as to why this has happened. And also why in the Muslim world, forget Shia sect, in the Muslim world, why hasn't it been respected? This quote is by Sharif al-Radhi, the brother of Sharif al-Murtada. Sharif al-Murtada, one of our great classical Shia scholars, pioneering Shia scholars, around 10th, 11th century, at the time of Shaykh al-Tusi, Shaykh al-Mufid. Sharif al-Radhi has said, the object of this compilation, Nahjul Balagha, it's a compilation, is that I should bring forth Amirul Mu'mineen's greatness and superiority in the art of rhetoric, Balagha, which is in addition to his countless qualities and innumerable distinctions, and to show that he has risen to the highest pinnacle of this attainment, is singular, no one else can match him, is singular amongst all those predecessors whose utterances are quoted here and there, whereas his own utterances are like an onrushing and irresistible stream, and such a treasure of subtleties in language is unmatched. What a beautiful niyyah he had. And sadly, Shia community and wider Muslim world has not brought out this irresistible stream. One of the reasons is, by the way, some of our respected Sunni scholars say, well, you can't trust Nahjul Balagha because not everything is verified in there. He has a couple of responses, but I'll share a couple of responses with you there. Number one, the object of Nahjul Balagha is not to be some authentic book, like Sahih Muslim or Sahih Bukhari, or Sunan Ibn Majah, for example. That's not the object. It's a literary work for us to reflect on, number one. So let's get the question right. Number two, and you will even find this on al-islam.org. If you go on a khutbah, you will find other sources of Nahjul Balagha there, from Zamakhshari, for example, from Shaykh al-Tusi, from Shaykh al-Mufid. Other scholars after Sharif al-Radhi attempted to authenticate Nahjul Balagha and wrote works that authenticated the majority of Nahjul Balagha, that you can trace it now in other works. So now you can ascribe a level of authenticity to Nahjul Balagha. Yes, you can. Even if it's not 100%, yes, you can. Majority, you can. And three is, remember that in history, was there anyone else uttering these statements at the time of Ali ibn Talib alayhi salam? Was Abu Bakr? Was Umar ibn Khattab? Was Uthman? Who else was there? Who else can you ascribe this body of work to? If you look, and I did a bit of research on this. If you look at the term nafs, which is mentioned in the Quran, nafs or nufus, souls, anfusihim, their souls, mentioned in the Quran, for example. If you look at this term, nafs, which means soul or self, my humble research tells me there is no other person except Ali ibn Abi Talib that has as many ahadith on the meaning of nafs than Ali ibn Abi Talib himself. No other person has explicated and explained what nafs means than Ali ibn Abi Talib. He has actually gone into the term and how it relates to the body and how it relates to our animalistic and vegetative faculties, our intellectual faculties, how the nafs grows, and how the nafs or soul should be protected. So even if people are not going to go by all these other arguments, tell me in history who else was there that talked about these things. Salawat, please. So, I want to end in the next few minutes only. I want to give you some answers as to why we have ignored it. Now, I have told you, okay, the situation, but why? What actually happened that the Muslim world and the Shia community ignored this book? You might find this quite interesting. I am sure you've all heard of the book, The Voice of Human Justice by George Jordak, yes? No? Some yes, some no. You've heard about it, right, okay. Please also read this book. If you feel Nahjul Balagha is a bit too weighty, read Voice of Human Justice. It's like the story of Imam Ali. Okay, that's a very nice book to read and very easy language. Translated from Arabic into English. Okay. George Jordak was a Lebanese Christian, not a Muslim. Lebanese Christian. I'm repeating. Okay. You know what he used to do, and I'm not saying, look, please do this. I'm saying, no, don't do this, boys and girls, because you'll criticize me. George Jordak used to skip some lessons of school, okay? And he used to sit by a spring, and he used to take Nahjul Balagha and read it himself, okay? Please, boys and girls, don't do that, because I know there are fines and all sorts of things. But please, have the guts to go and read Nahjul Balagha yourself, okay? When you can. Right, in your break time or whenever, okay? So, George Jordak, from a young age, he used to take Nahjul Balagha and he used to read it, okay? Now, what happened? Why did he start reading it? He said, I'm quoting from him, he says, Imam Ali's rightness, as a salihin, as one of the righteous, and his great personality interested me, but it had been lost in Muslim scholars' arguments. He said most of the Muslim scholars stuck to the issue of the Khilafah. Yes? At the cost of ignoring Ali's bright image. They see Ali's governorship, but his humane character was neglected. It didn't satisfy me. So I started studying his great and exceptional personality. I came back to the Murji'un spring side and to my childhood's Nahjul Balagha. I wrote all my books about Imam Ali in this way. Look at what he's saying. Now I'm talking about, I think this is 100 years ago, yeah. He was born in 1896. 100 years ago, over 100 years ago, he's saying that Muslim scholars ignored Imam Ali's character and only spoke about the wilayah. Today, when I go to a majlis of Eid al-Ghadir, or I go to a majlis about Imam Ali, most of the majlis, or most of the issues about the wilayah. Most. Okay, so what about the wilayah? No problem, I'm a follower of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Listen, I don't need to know that. What I need to know is the character. What I need to know is how he thought. He's saying this over 100 years ago. I'll give you one or two other quotes. You might find this even more interesting, right? He says, you may think that the Voice of Human Justice was published with the help of Muslims. You are wrong, he says. While I was writing, and I was the editor-in-chief of Ar-Risala magazine, what happened was that I wanted the Voice of Human Justice to be published. So I went around the Muslim communities and I asked for help. Nobody supported me. But the Bishop of Karmeliya tribe said, I will publish this book with my own financial resources. So the Voice of Human Justice was basically published through a bishop. Not Shia Muslims and non-Muslims, and that's a fact. And a third thing which you might find interesting, okay? He says that, salawat please. Where's it gone? Trying to find the quote actually. I will summarize it. He gives this story that Muslims met a minister of France, and the minister of France was talking about human rights. Those Muslims who met the minister of France said, we hear you talking about human rights, but why are you talking about this? We Muslims have this with Imam Ali. You figured this out much later than United Nations, but we have this with Imam Ali. The minister of France started laughing. He says, I'm laughing at your statement. He says, you may have it, but you Muslims never ever implemented it in your history and in your life today. Whereas we today are implementing it with the United Nations. That's what he said. Okay? So, that's the sorry status of Nahj Balagha. And the last quote before I end with the Q&A. And I want to end on this, please listen to this carefully. This is from Shaheed Mutahari, rahmatullahi alayh. Because some of you may say, well, these are other scholars. What about our own Shia scholars? What do our own Shia scholars say? This is exactly from Shaheed Mutahari, who is buried in the shrine of Masum Qum. Yes, if those of you have visited, okay. He has said from the glimpses of Nahj Balagha, you can find this book on alislam.org. He said, the alienation from the Nahj Balagha was not confined to me or others like me, but pervaded through the Islamic society. Okay? The spirit and content of the book were hidden from the eyes of all. Only lately had the Islamic world begun to explore Nahj Balagha. He's writing in the 1950s and 60s. Then he says, I must admit, like all the tulab of the Hawza Ilmiya of Qum, I admit that we were ignorant of the world of Nahj Balagha. We had met as strangers and passed by each other in the manner of strangers. Only a trifling incident occurred where I came into contact with Nahjul Balagha. We, the theology students, that means the tulab of the Hawza, we must confess that we have been estranged from Nahj Balagha. We have built a mental world of our own which is alien to the world of Nahjul Balagha. That's Shaheed Mutahari. Now, and I'm concluding, today, okay, there has been some changes. You will see Nahjul Balagha conferences in Qum. You will see that, or in Mashhad. You will see a bit more writings about Nahjul Balagha. You will see a book by Raza Shah, Cosmic Justice and Remembrance, the words of Imam Ali, which is in English. That's a nice book. But when he talks about mental world, it relates back to the questions I posed, which is, do we really know how to teach our children Islam? Do we really know how to teach our children the Qur'an? Do we know what social and political policies Ali had? Do we know his economic and leadership policies? Are we able to implement this? If the answer is no, then these lectures, I'm praying to Allah, will inshallah revive our spirit. My ignorance, inshallah yours, inshallah will be filled with the knowledge of Ali bin Talib alayhi salam.
I know what you were talking about Imam Ali's humanity and all of the things that you quoted.
Yes.
For me, I found, like, even though I got my own copy of the Nahj Balagha probably about 30 some years ago, but in the early days I found it difficult because if I went like starting from the beginning towards and going like in the order that it is placed, I found that a lot of the early khutbahs, they have a historical background, and I didn't really know the historical background, so I found it difficult to deal with. But growing up in Pakistan, I can tell you that Nahjul Balagha was talked about all the time from every member. However, it was not taught at the level that you... But just one quick comment. Do you think the Khutbah Humam essentially encapsulates that personality? Because I find that among the most beautiful fireside chats that one could think of. Especially because in just those few pages, at least 5 times Amir al-Mu'mineen is saying, non-violence is our first and forever duty. And that's the way that he was.
Jazakallah. Yes, I mean, yes, if you can say that, I agree with you, but you will also find, and I'm going to humbly share sermons with you, you will find a number of other sermons like Sermon 87, which encapsulates like his spiritual heart, which maybe the other sermons don't capture. So I think each sermon captures a particular dimension of Imam alayhi salam, which if put together, gives you a fuller picture. And as you said about finding it hard to kind of read Nahjul Balagha, I think it's a good comment. One of the things we can do is just read the sayings, because the sayings, even the very short sayings, give us a very nice insight into the way he thought, inshallah.
My concern is about human rights. You spoke about Imam Ali, talked about human rights.
Yes.
But at that time, slavery was very, very...
Yes.
So the question is, Islam was not able, because of the social reasons, whatever, was not able to eradicate. It took many, many years before it was done. Can you explain the rationale behind what Islam was not able to do?
No, Jazakallah. So you're absolutely right that from the Qur'an and from the Ahadith, the whole spirit is to treat slaves well and to free them, which we know the Prophet, Imam Ali, bin Islam freed many slaves. So one thing is that slavery wasn't simply a characteristic of the Islamic society. It was a characteristic of the world. And I think that's very important to look at. Greek civilization, right? Roman civilization. So this is something which Islam, to give its credit, actually went a long way. You take Bilal, freeing Bilal and allowing him to be this companion of Rasulullah. If we capture the spirit, we can very easily say that that was the spirit of Islam. To eradicate completely would have been difficult, because as I said, I don't think we should look at it as an Islamic problem, but a world problem. So if today, you talk about social media being ingrained and there's a problem in AI, okay, how do you get rid of that after many years? So I think the question more is, what did Islam accomplish? And now can we move forward from that? And I think there are some reformist scholars that do now say that slavery is not appropriate, it is immoral, and that wasn't the spirit of Islam. So I think there are some discussions around that. But as to why, my humble answer, it was a world problem, and for an Arab society to cure that completely, I think would have been very difficult. Yes.